Alright, ladies and gentlemen, today we'll be looking at escapes from side control. So if you haven't already, I suggest you watch the video defining each of our side control positions. In today's video, we're going to look at the counters or the defensive escapes for each of those positions.
Guys, the first escape we're looking at is from a standard side control position. So, I'm being caught in the standard side control position. The first thing I want to try and do is create space. Create space, we've got to utilize frames. First simple frame we're going to use is a cross face, the forearm across the neck and my forearm on the hip. So I'm taking my elbow and I'm pulling it into the cavity on the opponent's hip. We're going to begin with a guard recovery. The guard recovery will be initiated off a buck or a bridge to create a cavity in which I can push my bum out and pull my bottom knee in. I'm going to wedge my knee in between his hip and his quad. Perfect for me, bro. So notice how my shin is now on the inside of his body. This creates an alternative frame to my hands. It's going to aid in me bringing my other leg in to recover a guard position. My hands stay active in this position so that it doesn't close down on my head and on my chest. I want to be on my side. I don't want to be flat on my back. I can then use my free leg to stamp on my Achilles that's on the inside. I can extend my arms and then square up. By extending my hip, I create distance. My hands can be in front to prevent him moving onto me and pinning me back to the floor. Once I've got that cavity in the space, it's a matter of pulling my knees through. I can go to an open guard or I can go to a closed guard. Let's look at that again from a different angle.
Utilizing that particular type of guard recovery, your hands, your elbows, your hips and your knees all work together to extend your spine to create the space so that your legs can enter the equation and thereafter recover some sort of guard position. My next option from a standard side control position is to look for the underhook. The underhook is often an answer to escaping off the bottom. It is a very powerful and strong tool. The deeper the underhook, the stronger it is. A shallow underhook doesn't do much for us, especially if the guy's got a very strong whizzer. So the underhook to the top.
First thing we want to do is initiate our frames. Cross face on the opponent's neck and forearm into the hip. From here, we want to initiate the cavity by once again creating a little buck and a bridge and pulling our bum out. Once our body's out, we want to keep the cavity open for as long as possible as to allow my top hand to weave an underhook. So I can do that by bringing my top knee underneath the armpit to ensure that I keep that cavity open. I can use my elbow to connect to my knee, and as my leg straightens, my arm is going to follow it through. Immediately reaching for the far lat and getting up into my knees. When you come into the dogfight position, ensure that you get up on your feet as quick as you can to apply the appropriate pressure into the opponent. You'll then go about killing the whizzer. When I am exiting on that underhook, I'm reversing my body towards the back of his hip. I'm not coming off on a perpendicular, I'm escaping towards his hip. My underhook is reaching for that far lat, or it can reach for the far trap as well. Remember, when you're swimming in your underhook, begin with your elbow first and then let it go through. Only as a last resort do you want to have your hand shovel in. The hand by itself, if you're trying to shovel the underhook, can be very easily collapsed upon, to which it becomes a useless item. Whereas if my elbow gets through, typically the rest of my arm is going to follow
instantaneously. Another basic escape from the side control position is when the person has got unequal pressure and is destabilized himself when he's gotten on top. Often bigger guys, when they get on top, they will try and squash into you, pick their bum up high and keep their shoulders low. In this case, we can crunch down on the head and tip them over with our arm. Remember, this has to be timed well. Don't try and attempt this particular escape if the circumstance does not allow it. You will only gas your arms and tire yourself even further. The criteria required is the opponent's pressure tilting over your chest with their bum very high and their head very low. On your toes.
The first thing I'm going to do, person's bum is high, their head is low, they're trying to drive their weight into me, no problem. We're going to take our inside hand, we're going to come over the top and we're going to crunch down on their head. We're then going to stiff arm our hand closer to the hip and we're going to place it on his hip bone. I'm then going to use my feet. I'm going to buck and bridge into him and roll over my shoulder. I'm not just trying to bench press him off me with one hand. I'm using the power of my hips, my legs, transferring it through my frame, which is my hand, and then getting the sweep.
Be very careful when you are doing this particular technique, when your hand comes around the head, that your elbow is very strong. If you're weak, you can crawl him up and put you into an arm triangle. So be very aware when you've broken that spine and that posture that your hand is not easily pushed across your face because you can get caught in an arm triangle. This technique once again has to be used when the criteria is correct and not done continuously, otherwise you will fatigue yourself or put yourself in a dangerous situation. The next escape is our pendulum escape from the bottom standard side control. Now how this works, why I call it the pendulum, because my legs are going to swing like a pendulum to generate momentum to swing my body out from underneath the opponent. To hit this particular escape effectively, ideally you need to have both hands on the far side of the opponent's body. You're going to want to have to shift his body weight up towards our head whilst our body slides out from underneath him.
So in the standard side control position, the first thing I want to do is create that frame, right? Create the space for me to work within. My hand closest to the hip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn slightly onto my side so that I have a little cavity between his hip and mine. Come a bit more. Once I've got that little cavity and I've turned onto my side, my hand is going to reach through this cavity. Now, that hand is going to allow me to pass his body over my head. If the top hand can join him on the other side, this is going to be the first prize. You can, however, do it with one hand in front of the face. We're going to look at first both hands through. So both my hands are on the other side. Now what I want to do is I want to swing my legs back and forth until I felt I've got enough momentum to be able to pull myself out towards his head. When I do this, guys, ensure that you are aiming to pull yourself out of this hole just as much as you're trying to bring his body up to your head. Don't just try to bicep curl the opponent off you in this particular position. It requires both the movements to get an effective escape.
As I pull myself up, guys, I immediately want to come into that north-south position and have both hands in play. So guys, to stress that again, the movement that is utilized in this particular escape is one where, as my legs get towards the head side, I'm bringing both my arms up to my face. I'm not hinging at the bicep. I'm bringing up at the shoulder and then sucking my head out in a circular motion to escape underneath the opponent's body. How many times you swing your legs is completely up to you. If you need 3 swings to get enough energy, then you swing 3 times. If you need 1, you do it on 1 take. Moving on to the next particular position in side control, which is your orthodox scarf.
When you are in the orthodox scarf position, the opponent has the shoulder controlled, and he has my elbow on the far side. We want to be very careful in this position. Any one misstep can cause us to be quickly submitted. The first thing we want to do is our inside elbow, the one that's being held. This is the hand we're going to want to free. We want to take our inside hand and begin to initiate a crossface. Be careful with this as well. Don't allow your hand to be easily pushed across your head because an arm triangle might be initiated. A good way to do a crossface from here is to simply place your palm under his chin. However, not completely extending your hand as to give him too much control of the arm. The next movement is I'm going to buck and turn in, get my bum out, and shrug my inside elbow to the mat. So I want to get this elbow, as I shrug in, I want to pull it into the mat, and I want to wedge the elbow between the opponent's hip and the floor. So if you look at where the elbow is placed, it's wedged in between that hip and the floor. Once you're in this position, regardless of whether you're still holding your hand or your forearm, you're in a good position to initiate your escape. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up on this little cavity. We're going to create a bigger hole so that our knee can enter. Notice how my knee has come through the cavity. This is what we want. Now I've got a knee in and an elbow in control. It's very difficult for him to do anything from here. I would extend my hands, I'd straighten my body. If he doesn't move, my leg could come over. I could initiate arm bars. I could pull all the way through, look for triangles. Your most common reaction, however, once that knee comes through, if the guy knows half of what's happening, he'll begin to get to his knees. As he turns to face us, no problem, both our legs come into play and we recover a guard position.
The next position you might find yourself in if the guy is a scarf player is the judo side. The judo side, very similar to the orthodox side, will have your head wrapped instead of holding your shoulder. This is a very precarious situation. If you do not respond appropriately, you will be choked or neck cranked into the next session. So be very careful with that. When you're in that particular position, the first thing you want to do is turn in to face the opponent. Do not fight the urge in this particular movement to put your hand out towards his head because the arm triangle is far easier to catch. So let's look at the judo side position.
So my opponent has my head wrapped, okay, and is looking to control me from side control. Well, what I must not try and do is take this hand and try and fight him here. It'll be a losing battle. He'll very easily pass that hand across and finish me where I lay. What we need to do first and foremost is we need to turn into him. So we want to turn our hip and turn our head to face him. In this position, I will begin to pull my elbow as far as I can until it hits the mat. I'm going to take my hand at the rear and I'm going to bring it around the floating rib of the opponent and I'm going to connect my hands. Once I've connected my hands, guys, I'm going to want to bring my hips as close to his butt as I can and I'm going to tilt him forward. When I tilt him forward at a 45, I'm going to try and get my hips under his. Once he's floating, it's going to be very easy for me to bring him onto his shoulders on the far side. So I take a very good grip, I bridge into him, hips go under, and I roll completely over. The more your hips get under, the easier the actual technique will be implemented. But that's all reliant on having a good grip, a good bridge in, suck the hips under and then take his shoulders across down to the mat on the other side.
The next position is our twister side position. Twister side, very similar to the scarf, but in reverse, also known as a reverse scarf position.
I want the guy's elbow to run high under my arm. The higher up he gets with his elbow and his hip, the less my hands are able to prevent anything from happening, the more susceptible I am from being transitioned into mount or being submitted. So the first thing we want to do is get our hips high and shove the opponents nice and low over our hips. Once the opponent is over our hips, we now are going to look to turn in towards his hip and posture up on our inside hand. I'm going to reach across for his far hip and get on this hand. Once I'm on this hand, I'm going to get high and tall. I'm going to pull my inside knee through. This is the key. If I can't free this knee, it's going to be very difficult to escape. Once this knee's through, I take my leg on the far side and I place the hook on the inside. So this leg comes over and in. I then sit up straight, keep that control, pull the leg out and initiate the alternative hook. From here, it's a very easy transition to the seatbelt. Another side control position you will often find yourself in is the north-south position. Guys can get stuck here for a very long time. When you're in the north-south position, first thing is to identify what are your hands doing, where are they placed. Identifying where your hands are placed in the north-south position will ensure that your actual escape becomes far easier. We're going to look at the two options, right? The first one is if you have your hands on the inside and then when you have the hands on the outside. So in the north-south position, the first position we're looking at is when I have both my hands in front of his shoulders. This is a very strong position for the guy on the bottom. If we can get both hands up, we can frame on his shoulders and pull our body through. So the first thing I want to do is get both hands in. I want to pull my hips as low as I can. I'm going to frame by making C cups on his shoulders, and I'm going to get to my side. Once I'm on my side, I'm going to swing my legs, and my top hand is going to stiff arm him away. So both hands were on the outside of the shoulders. I frame in, swing my legs, and as that momentum builds, I stiff arm with that top hand, and thereafter escape. An alternative way of escaping the north side is if my hands are on the inside. So if my hands are on the inside of the north side, the first thing I want to do is free my head on one particular side. So if my head is free to my left, right, that is the side I want to be able to get my top elbow under. So I'm going to push on his hip, and I'm going to turn to the side of my head. I'm then going to take my top elbow and I'm going to fold it under his body. Now this requires some bridging and shutting. Once my hand comes out, we're blocking the hip and we're walking our legs in until we recover. From here, whichever side my head is placed, this is the side I want to block the hip on. So I'm going to block the hip with both hands. I'm going to turn in. I'm going to get that elbow underneath to create a frame. I'm then going to pull my knees through on the inside and I'm going to recover the position. If you find whilst doing this particular technique, the guy's arm gets in your way, so you've got the hand on the hip, and when you bring your knee in, his hand is blocking you from recovering, no problem. Take an extra scoot back with your bum, bring the knee in front of the bicep, then extend and recover. So his hand is blocking here, no problem. Take the hand from the near hip to the far hip, reverse, bring the shin across, clear it, and thereafter recover the guard position. The final escape from the north side is if I can get both my elbows in front of the opponent's chest, I can pop them up with my shoulders, bring my knees into my elbows and use those as almost a car jack to lift his body and then after recover. Here I want both my hands to come in the inside of his chest, have my elbow resting in the center. I'm going to pop him up with my shoulders and I'll bring my elbows and my knees together.
Once they're in here, I'm then going to swing my body out. I can have my hands on the side, and I slowly thereafter swing my body. So my elbows and my knees create the frame, generate the power from the hips and the shoulders, create a cavity, fill it, lift him a bit more, spin your body out.
Alright guys, that concludes our video. Bottom escapes from side control. Very basic, very effective, a good groundwork for you to work upon so that you become a little harder to hold in the particular position. Guys, thank you for watching the video. You should have liked, subscribe, comment in the bottom if you need help with any of the techniques, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you, Mo Shake Don't Bake.